Courting China, a News 10 special. Now here's political editor John Myers.
Well, there is a reason that places like Chinatown here in the heart of San Francisco have such a connection to California. It's not just the tourists from around the world who show up here. It is the long-standing history between China and California, a past which is rich in details and possibly a future that is rich in details as well. That's certainly what California's Governor Jerry Brown says is his reason for a new and broad push into expanding the Golden State's ties with China, and why the only foreign trade trip he's taken was in April to 6 cities in China. We went along with him, the only television news organization in the state to do so. Over the next half hour, we will examine some of the ways California is now courting China, its leaders and its entrepreneurs, and their cash.
I know you're all here because you're going to make a lot of money in California. And hopefully we're going to do great business.
It was that promise that led Jerry Brown and 100 of the state's business leaders to travel across the Pacific in April with a fairly simple sales pitch. After several tough years, California is on the move.
I think Governor Brown bringing such a large delegation of state government leaders sends a powerful message to the Chinese government that our government wants to help Chinese businesses come into California, create successful enterprises in California, hire California people, and grow and prosper in our environment.
Jerry Brown's courting of China was perhaps his biggest sales pitch on California yet. From regional leaders to the nation's commerce minister to China's premier, Li Keqiang.
We talked about the China-California relationship, which is quite extraordinary when people start treating California almost like it's a nation state.
California is the top state in the U.S. for Chinese imports and #1 for foreign investment from China and #1 for Chinese tourism.
The Chinese like California. They see growth potential. They see science and technology. They see iconic companies, iconic landmarks.
Mike Gilmetti should know the China Trade Mission's biggest news was a $1 billion investment in his family's Oakland waterfront complex. The project will include 3,000 condos plus retail development.
Those are jobs, and that'll create activity that has a multiplier effect on the rest of the economy, probably over $2 billion worth.
California business leaders say China, which has long loved American culture, has the money and the desire to own a part of it.
The Chinese are investing in the entertainment industry. They're investing in films being made in Hollywood. They purchased the AMC theater chain through the Wanda Group. They want to be cultural partners with us in entertaining the world.
And so for the governor and his springtime trade mission of business leaders and state officials, courting China is a no-brainer.
This is about jobs. It's about jobs in California. It's about investment. It's about harnessing human talent.
And there is a lot of human talent in this new courtship of China by California. Much of that talent is right here in the Sacramento region. The governor's trade mission included about 100 business leaders and entrepreneurs from across the Golden State, from those who are already leaders in this China-California relationship to entrepreneurs who sense a new and golden opportunity.
China is a tremendous opportunity for any green energy company.
We first caught up with entrepreneur Mike Hart in Beijing, one of 100 business people on the governor's trade mission. His focus, China's trash.
They have very poorly maintained landfills and a growing public unhappiness with incineration, which is their alternative.
His alternative is just outside Sacramento, energy from trash.
We routinely process things like biomass, plastic. These are mixed plastics that can't be recycled. Electronic waste.
Sierra Energy is a startup business using a modified blast furnace to heat trash to 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which converts it to synthetic gas, cleaner than natural gas. What's left over is essentially rock-like material that can be crushed and used to pave roads. But the company needs investors, which is what led Mike Hart to China. The governor's trade mission allowed him to court the investments he needs to take Sierra Energy to the next level.
We have very, very active discussions going on now with 3 large Chinese corporations that are all looking for a technology that will allow them to take their enormous waste stream and turn it to clean energy.
That's a deal that California's China experts would be proud of, and none have been more successful than Margaret Wong.
I always tell my client, you always sell what China wants. You don't want to sell what we have. It's very important to understand what they want so that you can sell the right thing.
Margaret Wong's McWong International really lives up to that name, with operations in both Shanghai and Sacramento. First in lighting supplies and now with environmental engineering projects, Wong has spent more than 20 years navigating the best channels for business in China.
In China, you do business as who you know to do business. Who you know is being established through relationships.
Which explains the big news this company announced during the China trade mission.
Sacramento-based McWong International and Emeryville-based New Logic Research have secured a $20 million contract.
That contract is for building a wastewater treatment plant in Inner Mongolia. In many ways, Wong's years of success in courting China are exactly what California officials say this trip was designed to help duplicate with others.
This is a combination of proven records, a combination of relationships, and a combination of our technology in order to win the deal.
And all of this helps explain why Governor Brown's trip was designed to prime the pump. That includes an agreement signed in Beijing with the Chinese national government, the first of its kind with an American state, to work on ways to promote new trade opportunities in everything from pharmaceuticals to agriculture.
The potential by 2020 is as high as $60 billion of investment in California. Whether we can do that and how we do that, that remains our challenge.
Or more precisely, the challenge for California business leaders like Mike Hart and Margaret Wong.
I see opportunity, I see low-hanging fruits. The next step is all about action.
Sacramento is, of course, the seat of state government here in California. From here, more than 6,000 miles to the south-southwest is Shanghai, one of China's most important locations for international trade. But Governor Jerry Brown and, frankly, a lot of the state's business leaders say to really court China, they need to plant the state's flag in Shanghai.
There's great opportunity from the intelligence of people in California and in China to collaborate in business, in art, in political thinking.
And now collaboration in a new Office of Trade and Investment, which the governor christened in a Shanghai ceremony on April 12th. The last of California's former international trade offices closed its doors a decade ago. Back then, there was sharp criticism of these offices at the state capitol in Sacramento. The nonpartisan legislative analyst at the time said trade offices abroad had not proved any clear impact on exports or foreign investment. Unlike those operations, the new Shanghai office is privately funded, a partnership with the nonprofit Bay Area Council. In this country, where the Communist Party government has a strong role in for-profit business, investors and entrepreneurs alike expect a government seal of approval.
Probably more so than in any other country, it's important in China to have both the government and the private sector working together. That's sort of their secret sauce of how they operate. And so this public-private partnership that we have here for the State Trade Office meets that just head on in a very beneficial way.
It has the imprimatur of the Chinese government, the imprimatur of California's government. You know, a lot of things happen in China in public-private partnerships.
And as California's delegation celebrated this new trade office, its business leaders, with the clear backing of the governor, had a chance to shake some hands, exchange business cards, and start to form the relationships that, over the long run, could pay off on both sides of the Pacific. Still to come on our News 10 special, Courting China. It's the governor's biggest Golden State dream, a high-speed train, and China could play a role in making it come true. Plus, California's world-famous wines aren't yet so famous in Asia's most powerful country.
Now back to Courting China, a News 10 special.
Well, part of the California-China connection, of course, is the railroad, largely built here in California through the might and the muscle of Chinese immigrants. But that connection between California and China when it comes to trains may not just be in the past. California, of course, has high-speed train dreams, and China may be able to make those dreams come true. It starts out like almost any other train you've been on, but the ride begins to slowly change into something faster than almost anywhere else. The Beijing to Shanghai high-speed rail line was built in just 2 years at a cost of about $32 billion. It whisks passengers southward through cities and then the rural countryside of East China. It's an inspiration for the man trying to build high-speed rail in California.
You know, we got to move mountains, that's all.
That's a lot. Jerry Brown's quest for a $68 billion San Francisco to LA bullet train faces legal, engineering, and financial mountains in its path. On this train ride in China, he brings along the chairman of California's high-speed rail agency, who spends time talking to one of the engineers for the company that built this railway. The train is a smooth ride, and state officials say even skeptics who ride one would be persuaded.
We're on the verge of starting construction, and when people see these kinds of trains operating in California and they get a chance to ride them, I think the next question will be, when does one come to my town?
But in China, those who didn't want a train coming through their own property or their own town, well, they were powerless to stop it. The Chinese system also suffered problems, breakdowns in the early going, and in 2011, a deadly crash.
You learn you got to do it right. You have to create engineering. They're pioneers. So we're coming after 16 other countries.
Some of those pioneers may want to help or finance high-speed rail in California. The governor's team has met with Chinese companies.
We are very interested in California.
Why?
Because we have very experienced in high-speed trains.
But federal rules would require any foreign company to open a U.S. plant if it wants to help build high-speed rail in America. 5.5 hours after this ride began, the train pulls into Shanghai, 800 miles faster than anything but flying, an experience the governor hopes he can export to California. You know, I think for a lot of us who live here in the Golden State, wine is a real cultural touchstone. And of course, the heart of the California wine industry is here in the Napa Valley. We think Napa is an internationally known place. But you travel about 7,000 miles west of Napa and you find that California wines are almost a new phenomenon.
For all wine consumed, California is still very much a small piece of the pie.
But the Golden State is eager to change that. This tasting room is in Shanghai. It's designed to look like what someone would see on the other side of the Pacific. Here, Chinese consumers can come and have the quintessential California wine experience.
The first reaction for most Chinese is, wow, this is really good. It's really fruity.
Similar reactions could be seen and heard at a large wine and food event during California's official April trade mission. Here, Chinese buyers, magazine writers, and others sipped, swirled, and soaked it all in. But wine is not a traditional part of the Chinese culture, and so back in Napa at wineries like Pine Ridge, what they are finding is the way to court the Chinese is to teach them.
Education is a big part of their culture, and they've applied that to their wine consumption. They're just gobbling up information as fast as they can.
About 600 cases of Pine Ridge wine a year ships to China, a similar amount from its sister winery Sagacio in Sonoma. That is quadruple what they were shipping just 4 years ago. In China, red wine is still king. Some say it's because the color red is a symbol of good luck and fortune. Others say the Mandarin word for red wine sounds more pleasing. Above all, though, the real test is whether something is genuine, authentic. China is, after all, a country where knockoffs and pirated items are a way of life. And so California's wine exporters like Kelly Duckhorn have come up with clever ideas, like a customs label that can be peeled off to show the bottle just as if it were bought in California.
We want our consumers to know that this is the real deal. This isn't a wine that was just quickly made for the Chinese market, thrown together with a label and put into place.
Wine is becoming something of a status symbol here, especially with China's rapidly growing middle class. Estimates are that group of Chinese will triple in size in just the next decade to more than 600 million people. And as with other goods in China, wine gets attention when it is linked to high-ranking officials. The photo op matters.
This trip from Governor Brown was a big deal for us to be a part of.
Even so, California's wine presence is still small in China. When the country's consumers do think of wine, it's often France, Australia, or New Zealand, whose governments subsidize marketing and shipping. But Californians remember well how their wine ultimately overtook those countries in the West. And now here in the Far East, they say California's wine is ready to be uncorked.
We've opened in the last year an additional office in the west of China in Chengdu, and then we're opening this year an additional office, same setup, visitor center, tasting room style in Beijing.
What's changing rapidly is people's knowledge and understanding and interest level in American wine and California wine.
Still to come on our News 10 special, Courting China, the toughest but perhaps most important item on California's China to-do list, a partnership on the biggest environmental issue of our time.
Now back to Courting China, a News 10 special.
Every day, an endless stream of boats and barges are moving their items through busy ports like Shanghai, out the Yangtze River, and out to the sea. But it is not just commerce that is moving through China to the west. It is also air pollution, greenhouse gases. China's problems are the world's problems. Jerry Brown is a governor who no longer seems to yearn for a national stage, but his 9-day visit to China made it clear Brown has been keeping an eye on the bigger picture.
We're in one world. We've got one big problem, and we all have to work on it.
That problem, he said, is damage to the environment, both long-term and immediate. Nowhere is it more pressing than in China. In city after city, California's trade delegation saw firsthand an air pollution problem that invokes images of Los Angeles in the 1960s and 70s. Here, it seems, wearing a mask outdoors is almost becoming a fashion statement. And global wind patterns make this kind of pollution not just a threat to the Chinese.
When you think about it, the air pollution in China, where does it go? In California, we feel the impact of it eventually, right? So I think there are opportunities for both sides to collaborate.
In meetings with Chinese officials, the governor and his top advisors found a lot of interest in what works in California, from tailpipe exhaust laws to the powers given to local air quality districts.
They know our programs very well. They've obviously been studying the various options they have to deal with their pollution problems here.
That may help explain the agreements on this visit that the Brown administration signed with Chinese officials. 4 agreements in all, with environmental cooperation the focus of an event at Beijing's Tsinghua University. China's challenges aren't a lack of political energy as much as they are the source of its physical energy: coal. Railroad cars full of coal, like these in the city of Nanjing in eastern China, are needed every day to fuel the power plants all over the country. An international study finds China burns more coal than the rest of the world combined. A major reason the country is the largest source of greenhouse gases from carbon. Which gets us back to Jerry Brown and California's ambitious efforts to fight climate change, efforts that may be all for nothing without change in China.
No one group can solve the problem. Not the United States, not California, not Japan, not China. We all have to do it.
The governor and his advisors spent months negotiating the details of the economic and environmental agreements he signed on this trade mission. International groups praised the pacts for going beyond just standard language. The agreement signed with Guangdong in particular gives some environmental groups an ongoing role to monitor climate change progress and help keep Chinese efforts pointed in the right direction.
The whole opportunity here is cooperation. It's being able to exchange information, exchange investment, exchange opportunities that otherwise wouldn't exist.
The governor's trade mission also found opportunity for the issue of climate change to boost its other big objective: help for California's economy. In the last 7 years, China has become a powerhouse in the business of climate-friendly technology. But for all its innovation, the country has a huge demand for even more.
That's the question that we get asked very often is, tell us about what are people doing in the U.S.? What are the technologies? Can you help bring some of those to China?
It's good.
California also stands to benefit from Chinese technical expertise. The country is a leading source of electric car batteries.
Watch out, I'm going to start it.
Governor Brown, who toured one Chinese battery and electric car company in Shenzhen, says California's goal of 1 million electric cars by 2025 won't happen without China. In an interview at the end of the trade mission, Brown said China shows a lot more promise for working with California than does Washington.
Well, I find them a lot more advanced than our United States Congress. I mean, they're just mired in mythology and primitive thinking when it comes to climate change. With that kind of power, so dedicated against renewable energy, there can be virtually no progress.
And progress is what Brown says he saw all over China since his first trip there in 1986. Critics at home say the governor ignored talking about many of China's problems. Brown counters by saying he was simply there to begin a dialogue. And if California can have that dialogue, it would seem everyone might win. Our climate change story was produced in partnership with KQED Public Television in San Francisco. Coming up, some final thoughts and our look at courting China. You know, China is a country that is hard to ignore, and to California's governor and business leaders, it's one that should not be ignored. Jerry Brown's trip made clear that he sees great things in China, but some people criticize him for not talking on that trip about what China can do better. It's a country with serious problems, human rights allegations, internet security threats, and a long trail of fights over stealing intellectual property. That's just to name a few. I asked the governor at the end of this trip about all of that and about why he didn't call out the Chinese on these issues.
Look, I'm not a candidate for president. If I were, I would talk on the national issues. I'm the governor of California. My responsibility and my goal is to increase investment in California, expand employment, and an important way to do that is to attract foreign investment.
Well, that answer isn't likely to satisfy some people, but Jerry Brown is a governor whose political ambitions now seem secondary to his policy goals, and he's solely focused on California, it seems. By the way, the nonprofit group that sponsored the trade trip surveyed the delegates after they came home. 90% now say they have a business deal in the works in China. It's that old Chinese proverb, right? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. I'm political editor John Myers. For all of us here, thanks for watching.